Hey, welcome to another Front-End Engineering Explained. It's been a while, if you've been following one after the other, of course. Um, let's dive right into it. So I've been meaning to make a video about this for some time, and then this post came across my radar again a couple of days ago, and I was like, okay, this is a sign, I should do it. So this is about skip links. So this article I will link in the description, and please do read it. It goes into a lot of detail. What it is talking about here is a criteria that's in WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it's this 2.4.1 about bypassing blocks. So what it says here is you should afford a mechanism, you should make a mechanism available to bypass blocks of content that are repeated on multiple web pages. So what does that mean? Well, oftentimes on a web page, we have like a bar at the top that contains a logo, maybe some navigation, maybe a search input, and then maybe you have like breadcrumbs, and then you have the main content of the page, something like that. Maybe you have a big hero image before the main content, something like that. And then when the user navigates to the next page, a lot of this is often repeated again: logo, navigation, search input, breadcrumbs, stuff like that. So this essentially says offer a way for users to skip over that content. Why? Well, because if you're using a mouse and you have eyesight, you can of course easily just scroll or move your mouse pointer to wherever you want to go. Imagine, for example, you land on a site, and we'll look at some examples in a second, and there's a bunch of navigation and whatnot, but then there's these articles and it's just teasers. So it's maybe an image with like a heading and maybe a short little description of what the article is about. So with a mouse, of course, you could scroll and then click on the one that you want and then go to the article. And then again, on that page, a lot of the same things will load, but you can, of course, scroll if need be to get to the article content and start reading. Now, if you're using, for example, a screen reader, or if you're using not a pointing device, so not a mouse, but you're relying on the keyboard, then, of course, how do you skip over this stuff, right? So this is where this comes in. So, for example, here it gives some suggestions of what you might do, adding a link at the top of each page that goes directly to the main content area, adding a link at the beginning of a block of repeated content to go to the end of the block, adding links at the top of the page to each area of the content. And then they also go on to discuss landmark regions. We'll touch on that briefly, but I don't want to go too much into that. But this all comes down to this idea of a skip links menu. So we'll look at one, but before we look at an implementation of one, let me show you the difficulty. And we're gonna look at one of the classics, old CNN.com. And I don't know if maybe they're just keeping the website kind of crappy now and a little bit broken, because us web developers has always referenced this to show how you shouldn't be doing some things, or if it's just a big ship and it takes long to turn. But let's look at this one. So I've just loaded up the page and I can't use my mouse, and I want to maybe read the article about amazing reduction in Alzheimer's risk verified by blood markers. Now, first things first, if I press tab now, like, it doesn't seem like anything's happening. In fact, something did happen. What happened is my focus has moved to the sign into CNN with Google little overlay there, modal. I know that because I've figured it out. But if I was just pressing tab, I'd be like, what the hell? What's going on? Okay, first problem. Press escape, it goes away. Now if I press tab, it goes to the little burgerish menu there. If I press my enter key, it opens the whole thing. If I press tab, it goes to the X. If I press enter again, it closes. Cool. Now we're moving through, right? But again, you can see I'm going to have to tab through all of this. And I'm not yet where I want to be. So I'm still going to go. There we go. Now I'm where I want to be. Now I can press enter and I can read the article. Of course, when I go to the next page, all of this information is going to be repeated, and I'm going to have to do this tab, tab, tab again, right? Now, let me reload the page, and I'll show you from the perspective of somebody using a screen reader. And of course, we're going to run into the same problem with the tab. So I'm just going to go ahead and press escape so the little Google thing there goes away. So I'm going to open up VoiceOver, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open what is called the rotor, and basically this gives the screen reader user some additional options of how they can navigate the page. They can see all the links on the page, they can see all the headings on the page, and they can jump right to any of these. They can also see landmarks, and that is where this is actually going to come in useful. Because if you think about it, a screen reader doesn't see the layout or anything. So if we turn off CSS, that is essentially what the screen reader has to work with. So let's disable all styles, and this is what they work with. And if you go from the top here, very interestingly, the very first thing, let me just close that, is a CNN Values Your Feedback survey about if this ad is relevant to you. So you're going to have to like kind of skip over all of this stuff, right? But okay, just wanted to show you that. Remember to always sometimes just disable your styles and just see what the screen reader has to work with. Right, so let me demonstrate the rotor and how that enables a screen reader user to skip over all that craft and get to where they want to go. Takes a second to just open up VoiceOver, open in a second. There we go.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Mindfulness landmarks menu.
So here's the landmarks, and here we can see that there's a banner. That's the ad. That's not loading because I have Privacy Badger. Also, one thing to notice with these landmarks is there are 1, 2, 3, 4 navigation that's just marked as navigation. So we don't know which navigation things these are. If we move over them, they're highlighted here for us. But of course, if I can't see that, that is not useful to me. It just tells me that there's navigation. I don't know what it is. There's 2 that says user account navigation. Again, you don't have to add nav or navigation to the name of your landmark, as it will already be announced that way. So this could just have said user account. But again, there's 2 on the page, but at least that's clear what it is. Important thing here is there's a main. Pressing that will jump.
Lining up to kick the football. Sold stock/e+/getty images. Link and one more item and 43.
And now if I tab, I've jumped back to that because the focus is probably taken over by the JavaScript and it's moving focus back there instead of where I've had focus here, or the focus didn't actually move even though it looked like it moved. And I'll show you what might be happening there. Okay, let's stop bashing on CNN for a moment. Turn on VoiceOver off, and let's go over to something like Google Drive. They do something interesting here. So if I load this page for the first time and I press tab, it's going to take my focus there. Now let me go there. So I have skip to main content, which they do something also that's kind of yuck, because they steal my focus and they move it to where they think I want it to be. And now I had to like click on a different part of the page in order to get the skip navigation menu. But here you can see what a skip navigation menu might look like. So for you, when you look at the page visually, you don't see these. Of course, you don't have to hide these. You can sometimes include them in your design, and then they're just visible for everybody. Because again, curve cut effect, this could be beneficial for other users as well. But then they have skip to main content, but then it's interesting, they have keyboard shortcuts and accessibility feedback, which are 2 other options that you can open up. So that is what they've done here. At least they have a skip menu. Interestingly, pressing escape doesn't take it away, but that's okay. Pressing tab again moves us back to where they initially forced the focus. If we move over to MDN and we press refresh here, here is implemented a proper skip linked navigation. So first time I press, we get skip to main content, which is of course going to take us to this whole article in the middle. Press it again, skip to search, and then press again, skip to select a language, and then it goes into our ad. Interestingly, there's no longer a skip to navigation one, which used to be in there, but relatively quick to get to the navigation. So this one is pretty good. I have to say, Of the three we looked at, MDN's implementation is definitely the best. Now, how would you implement this for your website? Well, I'm going to make it really easy for you. I have this project that from time to time, I've spoken about this the other day when I talked about the SVG icon web component. You can find the video here on my YouTube channel as well. I have this repository called Common Components, also called Fiori, because Fiori Plus does these little like gear looking things that almost look like they can fit into one another, like components being composed together. And from time to time, I play around with some different components, and I'll just like stick them in various forms of readiness into the repo. Over time, the idea is that I just build up a bunch of useful components that either I reuse or other people can reuse and also contribute to and improve and all this kind of stuff. The idea there is, of course, that it's web standards based and not based on any framework, anything. Now with all the frameworks supporting custom elements and other features of web components, of course, you can use your web components with whichever framework you happen to be using at the moment. So let's jump over to all VS Code and let me show you how you would do this. So, right, there's a little README that gives you pretty much all the information you need. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the page over here. I'm going to remove some CSS over there and save it up. And I'm going to go ahead and open this with Live Server. And so here is the page. Right now, of course, if you press tab, it's going to go to search and then it's going to go to links at the bottom. And there we can jump through those links, but there is no skip link navigation. Let's fix that. So if we look through the README, it says the first thing you want to do is you want to link the main.css. So that's the main.css that lives right here. Of course, you can copy it to wherever it makes sense in the structure of your website. I'll just add it in here. One thing that immediately will disappear is you might have seen some things that said main or blah, 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 possibly some other ones that we'll look at a second that is meant to be visually hidden, because this class is actually inside main.css, so for a moment it was showing up there. But again, still no skip links. But here's our skip links. So it's a simple nav. Now here's a couple of important things that I'm going to talk through. And then we have an unordered list, and we have 3 links. You may not need all the links. So choose wisely what you think will be most useful for your users. You might only need the skip to main content. Also think about the order. If you have 3, for example, like in this case, what is the most likely order that users would want to go? Would they want to jump to the main content first? Is that the primary thing they're coming to your site for? Or might they want to go to navigation first? Or would search be the most useful thing? And reorder these in whatever order makes sense to you. You don't need to change the CSS or anything for this to work. You can freely move these list items around in any order. That doesn't matter. A couple of things. So when we looked at the landmarks, you would remember that it said there on CNN that there's these 4 navigation landmarks, but they just said navigation. Now, that is because they are using a nav, but they're not labeling it. There's no ARIA label for it. Now, there's a couple of options you can do here. You can use ARIA label. The problem with ARIA label is if you offer your web page in different languages, or as I always like to just remind people again, is even if you don't offer your website in a language other than English, it does not stop anybody. Well, technically there's ways to stop people, but please don't. It is possible for people to use built-in tools in their browser of choice to translate your website into whichever language they feel most comfortable with. Now, most, if not all of these tools do not translate what's in ARIA label, right? So the way to get around that is to use a span with plain text and then use this visually hidden utility, which again you will find in the CSS. It's right there. And I might have talked about this before, but essentially what this does is it hides content from users, but it doesn't hide it from screen readers. So this will still be read aloud to screen reader users. Also, by giving this an ID and then saying aria labeled by and using the same ID over here, the same value over here, now your navigation actually has a accessible name. So I'll show you what this does in a second when we open this up in the browser again. But you will also notice that I didn't include the word navigation in here because, as we saw, VoiceOver and other screen readers will add that already. It's like when you write alt text, don't say image of, because the screen reader will already prepend that to whatever it reads out. Okay, so this would be clearly identified as main navigation because we're over here, and then the same goes here. This will be skip links navigation, right? We're doing the same trick here. Now, if we grab all of this and we bring it into our HTML, we're going to make this the very first thing inside our body. Now, if we go back and let's just make sure that we reload, press tab, skip to main content, skip to main navigation, skip to search. You will also see there's a little bit of an animation there just to make it a little nicer, but because we want to ensure that we keep adhere to user choice and ensure our things are accessible, we have a media query here for prefers reduced motion, reduce, and if a user has expressed that preference, then we set our transition to none. So I can show you that in action. So if I go ahead and open up, let's open accessibility, and then let's search for, reduce motion, and let's turn that on, and then don't really have to refresh, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Now you can see that little animation no longer happens. If I turn that preference off, now you can see we're getting a little animation again. Okay, so that's it. You have a skip to navigation, completely accessible, and you also have, of course, you have complete control because you bring the CSS into your page, but if you don't want to mess with the CSS, I do give you quite a few options where you can override these custom properties in your CSS and then change things like the background color, inline size, nav-link color, outline, all these kinds of things to your own, to what you prefer it to be. I give the z-index a very big number of 999. If you need more, go for it. I saw there's a hack that somebody, I can't remember the article now, used calc infinity. You always win. So, but anyway, so you have these that you can override if you don't want to touch the CSS, but of course you can also go in here and, change things as you need to. You can also, of course, read through this if you want to see how this is all done. But that's how easy it is to add that to your website today. Now, there'll be a link to the repository where you can find all of this information. But let's just have a look quickly at some of these things, because the other thing that I want to mention is, remember on CNN I also said that while it looked like the focus moved to the main, maybe the focus didn't actually move. And that is because when you link to things from here, it's critical that this in-page link you're using actually exists. And secondly, it's important that the element that this ID resides on is focusable. Now, if it's not natively focusable, like for example, this main section over here, add tab index -1 onto it. This does not mess with the default tabbing order of your page, but it now just makes this focusable. So now your focus will actually be here. The same thing when we link to the main navigation. The nav element itself is not focusable, so we add tab index -1. Now it is focusable. One place where I didn't do this is for search, because here I move focus directly to the input element. And because that is natively focusable, there's nothing else you need to do here, right? So that is also important to keep in mind. So now with the page implemented, let's head over to the browser And I'm going to quickly grab the link here and I'm going to open it up in here. Nice. And let me turn on VoiceOver again. And then I'll show you a couple of things. So I'll just tab through the links, but then I'll also open the rotor just to show you what the landmarks look like. So here we go. Booting up. There we go.
Heading level 1. The curve cut.
All right.
Entering skip links heading level 1. The curve cut if link. Skip to main navigation. The link. Skip to search. Link. The curve cut if heading level 1. Link. About the site. Link. Bullet. Link. Contact. Group landmarks menu. Banner. Skip links navigation. Banner. Main navigation. Search. Site search form. Main. You are currently in a VoiceOver menu.
So as you can see, this is clear that we have our skip links navigation, we have our main navigation, we have our site search form, and we have our main, and then we have our banner, which is where all our, what you may call it, is in, all our basic navigation and our search and that kind of stuff. So this would normally be your page header or whatever that may be. So let's shift tab back a little bit.
Enter your search text field, blank, site search, skip links navigation.
So as you can see, because I moved focus directly into the search form, it immediately started reading out what was focused. Okay, that was quite a lot, but most of it was me just talking about why this is important.
VoiceOver off.
Of course, implementing this is going to take you maybe a minute. It's probably going to take you longer to deploy this to your production instance than it is to actually add it to your website. So I would encourage you to go ahead and do this today, but please ensure that you include only the links that make sense for your website. Make sure those in-page links, the IDs you're referencing, actually exist on the page, and make sure that whatever you're moving focus to is focusable. If it's not, add that tab index -1. And hey, if there's anything I can do to make this component better, if there's any improvements I can do, please open an issue on the repository, open a pull request, whatever the case may be. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you like this one, give it a old thumbs up. And if you want more content like this around HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, and just all the other things that makes front-end engineering career, hit subscribe, and I will speak to you all soon. Peace.